today the hidden revenue multipliers inside your service drive. And it's really going to focus on where profit leakage happens and how to capture it. So most dealerships don't have a revenue problem. They have a leakage problem. And every day you are really making thousands of decisions across customer pay, warranty, and internal work. Now, while each one of them seems small, it's when they significantly impact together effective labor rate, warranty performance, and overall fixed operations profitability. And so in this virtual classroom today, James and I are going to really break down where that loss actually occurs and how to better understand and manage it in your own operations. So one of the things that we want to really talk about is that we really want you to take one or two things from today that you're going to actually be able to go back into the dealership. As Melissa said, my name's Maureen Martin, and I am our Vice President of Strategic Alliances. I work very closely with KADA. And with me is my colleague, James Grogan. James is our EVP of Client Success and Services. So as we start to talk about it, we thought it was good to start with really what is happening in the industry. I mean, the currents of change are really reshaping the industry. When you look at all the analysts that are out there talking, you will hear that the dealer pre-tax profit is down 24%, that profit per unit on the variable side is down 33%, and that 3 of 4 dealers expect margin pressure to continue. Now, these pressures are creating what Dynatron calls a margin erosion crisis. And you know it better than anyone in fixed operations. You see it in increased parts pricing, technician shortages, customer expectations that are elevated. And that margin erosion is real, and it's happening both visibly and in hidden ways. And that's where we really want to dig into. So when you look at it, we're going to say, all right, the shift of the profit windfall is over. Longer buying cycles. Customers are taking more time in making those decisions, particularly with the impacts of the economics that we hear about every day. There's those rising costs, inventory pressures, warranty pushback from the OEMs. So dealers must really find a new profit resource. And that resource is all of you in fixed operations. Why does it matter more than ever? Fixed operation margins run about 45 to 55% nationally. And we all know an aging vehicle fleet. I'm here in Washington, D.C., had an opportunity with Mike Stanton and the team to come over from NADA, really looking at the aging vehicle fleet, about on average 12 years that are out in the longer life cycle. That brings us more opportunities. The service we know drives customer loyalty and retention, and is one of the few dealership levers that leaders fully control. But that real issue isn't the revenue, it's the leakage that's happening around it. So most dealerships, the revenue already exists in your service drive. It's just not being captured consistently. So we want to really look at how can we do that visibly and invisibly, things that we can look at to really dig into. And when we talk about the hidden problem, those profit leakage and fixed operations really come around 4 particular areas we're going to talk about today. The first is around pricing inconsistencies to the market themselves, like franchise as well as aftermarket. Looking at the discounting behaviors. James always likes to say, even if you don't have a discounting policy, you have a policy. But we're going to look at it from the perspective of when we are discounting, if you're under discounting, then you're going to be leaving money and profitability on the table. If we are overcharging the customer, that's going to have a direct impact on client retention. Now, we know from working with over 4,000 dealerships in the US and Canada that labor opco usage is an issue. And the inconsistency of it makes it very difficult to take data and be able to make those data-driven decisions. And that then has an impact on warranty execution gaps. And we would look at that because, as you know, your ability for warranty, both in labor and on the parts side, is really impacted by the effective labor rate. And so we really want to kind of dig into some of that to really have those opportunities for you to take back into the dealership and execute as a focus area. So, James, let's first jump into effective labor rate.
Yeah, and that's a great place to start, Maureen. Effective labor rate, we kind of coined, death by a thousand cuts. And it's because there's no real large reduction of impact. What it is it's minor adjustments all throughout the day that result in this death by a thousand cuts. So when we think about ELR impact, we really want to look at three different parts of this, right? So one, the advisor pricing decision, right? Are we allowing our advisors to determine the price in our service department versus what we've actually established? Technician coding decisions, right? So are we coding the jobs the right way? Are we coding them with the right op codes, whether it's warranty, repair, maintenance? Are we using the right codes to drive the right price? And then approval and discount choices. As Maureen said, if you don't have a discount policy, you have a discount policy. And so understanding one, what is the implications of the discount? What is the implication of the adjustment? Who owns that? And really determining, do you have a process moving forward that's going to make sure that one, we're taking care of the customer, obviously, but two, we're not doing it at the risk of losing profitability. So all three of these reduce ELR over time. And I think one of the big things to kind of think about in shifting your brain is ELRs, it's just not price. It really is an execution discipline. So if we talk more about this and we look at our next slide, you think about, well, why am I having these challenges with ELR, right? And really what we've determined, once again, working with the large dealer amount of dealers we do, is that there's a data fog around fixed operations, right? And so when we have this data fog, you as a dealer don't necessarily have visibility in, right? So you have inconsistent op codes. You have an unknown compliance to your pricing. One, you're trying to manage millions of repair order lines throughout the year, right? You're trying to understand competitive market and comparative market data, right? Technician capacity changes might not be visible. And then really understanding like what is the aftermarket doing? This fog that comes around these questions really gives us kind of a false sense of security in where we are when we look at our ELR, when we look at our pricing, especially when we look at some of the disciplines we're going to go over today. So if we talk through the next one, Maureen, if you could flip us to the next slide. Oh, did we lose Maureen?
Yes, it looks like she's going
I was going
back.
to say either that or she's doing a great job at playing a mime. See 1 second if she comes back. If not, we will course correct, right? The great part of automotive is we're always ready for the course correct.
That is correct.
Yep, that's right. Give me 1 second. Appreciate everybody bearing with us. And then let me share my screen. And then we probably just need to be on the lookout if she tries to rejoin.
I'm watching.
Thank you. All right. So we talked about the data fog. Once again, appreciate everybody bearing with us for a second. We talked about the inconsistent op code, unknown price and compliance, millions of repair order lines that we're trying to manage, comparative market data, technician capacity changes, and aftermarket visibility. And this really creates, like we said, a data fog around, do we have the right pricing? How should we be managing this? What really do discounts look like? What does really profitability look like? So the important part is that we got to get away from guesswork, right? We have to get away from using a quote unquote our gut, right? Well, I think the customer will pay this. I feel the customer will pay this. The guy down the street I heard charges this, right? We've based these decisions on our instinct. We've based this decision on our careers. But the problem is it leads to inconsistent execution, and we really have a hidden margin loss. We're not truly in the sweet spot because either one, we're operating off of assumptive data, or two, gut work doesn't actually mean that it's accurate. So we really want to get away from guesswork, right? And when we don't get away from guesswork, what happens is we allow leakage. We allow discounting that lowers our effective labor rate. We allow inconsistent pricing that erodes margin. We allow miscoded labor that undervalues our work. And so to kind of get back to this, ELR is behavior driven. So moving from thinking of ELR as, well, it's my price, I set it, I'm good to go. It's really setting it to a position where the next thing is really to drive behavior. So think about that key concept takeaway. Okay. ELR isn't set, it's earned through execution. When you set your price, I think we've all are aware that when we set a price, that doesn't mean that now all of a sudden we start collecting that price fully. We have to have process in place. We have to talk with our team. We have to give them the understanding of why we're setting this price. What's the research behind it? How do we make them feel comfortable with it, especially if that price is an increase in the market? If it's a decrease, right, which sometimes has to happen, then we still need to go through those steps. But if we're significantly going to increase the price on something, or we're going to stair step it over the course of a couple months to become more competitive in the market and earn that profitability balance, we need to understand that setting it and forgetting it is not the key concept anymore. The key concept is the execution of the pricing itself. So when we have solid ELR, when we have great price compliance, when we're utilizing the data, other things we need to think about is how weak CP pricing equals lower warranty benchmarks, right? As we know, effective labor rate is what drives your current warranty rate increases, right? So if we have inconsistent pricing, if we have inconsistent discounting, if we have inconsistent market evaluations, if we have inconsistent, all of these things we talked about in the data fog, then we're limiting ourselves on maximizing our warranty rate increase as well. Now, the part about the execution is if we go and we do all these behaviors and we get the market data, we get the comparative data, we use that and get away from guesswork. We use it to get away from our gut feeling, and we establish our pricing, right? And we're confident and we know it's accurate for the market. The inconsistent execution is still going to open us up to missing maximizing our reimbursement, right? We should not ever be surprised that when we go from a filing and we're looking at, say a rate of X, that we actually only find a rate of Y because once again, all of a sudden we find labor's being adjusted. There's a normal amount of discounts. All of those things we should have visibility into before, and we should be managing, and it shouldn't be a surprise, especially when we're going to try to increase our warranty rates. So let's talk about something that we call at Dynatron a forced choice dilemma. As we've seen in before, and most of you have probably experienced, because this is how we've done it in the industry for a number of years, we've really fell into two camps of thinking. One, we're trying to maximize our profitability, but in return, we kill our retention, right? So we're collecting every single dollar we can from every client we can, but we know that over time that kills retention. Or the choice has been run as much retention, run as heavy as you can, get as many clients as you can. The problem is your profitability suffers. And so one is to get as much as you can, knowing that you'll have limited customers. The other thought is let's get as much as I can, knowing I'm going to have limited profitability. Really, where we need to find is the sweet spot in between the two. Okay. We need to figure out, based on our pricing, based on our market, how do we optimize profitability and retention? We can't continue to live in one world or the other as we have in the past. We have to find that sweet spot in between. What's going to drive my customers and keep them coming to my service department, but also what's going to drive the best profitability situation to where I'm fair priced in the market. I'm able to pay my technicians. I'm able to give people raises. I'm able to generate profitability, but I'm also not doing it at the extent of losing the our retained customers.
James, first of all,
Welcome
apologies.
back.
They lost the internet here at the Grand Hyatt in Washington, D.C. So it is so great to be back. And my apologies. Thank you so much for running the slides. James, when we talk about the forced choice dilemma, I think one of the things I'm always thinking about, it's really the execution that creates the illusion of the trade-off between, profitability and retention. So let's talk about kind of reframing the problem. Let's look at, it's really not about raising prices. And often we get that where someone will say, if I just raise my prices, then I can meet my goals and I need to have. But it's really more about capturing what you already have earned. And we talked about margin erosion is happening both visibly and beneath the surface. It's really the consistency of the visibility. And James talked about that earlier when he talked about that data fog. So let's talk about what better looks like. We've talked about the consistency in pricing execution, and that can be both in how you are pricing the individual jobs, as well as how consistently are your service advisors executing those pricing executions. So the second we want to look at is clean, standardized data. And that's around having that pricing policy and reducing adjustments. And then visibility into every decision. So when we're looking at it, what really is having an impact that will drive that forced choice dilemma? And how do we make sure that we're really doing what we call at Dynatron the perfect price? So let's talk about the perfect price, the price that maximizes both the profitability, right? So looking at that forced choice dilemma, what maximizes both the profitability and the retention. And what we will always say is that both extremes will destroy value. And if we're not having a value conversation, then we're focused just on price alone. When we do underpricing, we're going to have margin leakage, one of the biggest impacts to ELR. We're going to have lower warranty rates because we know that it's based on your CP effective labor rate will then have an impact when you want to do a warranty filing and is a hidden profit loss. Now, on the other side, if we're overpricing, then we know that there's going to be customer churn. And that customer churn often, if they're leaving us, are going to be going to the aftermarket. We're going to have lost service visits. And knowing that our vehicles are in service for a longer lifetime, the vehicle that about 12 years was stated yesterday, but that's also a competitive disadvantage. And we often talk about really making sure that underpricing and overpricing are happening is building that confidence in the pricing strategy that we start with. Perfect pricing is going to always align both market competitiveness and profitability. So what changes when you fix those profit leakages in fixed operations? Well, first and foremost, most important is going to have higher effective labor rate. We're going to have better warranty outcomes because we are really looking at that perfect price. We're going to have improved retention. The biggest opportunity is the lifetime customer value that we have that you work so hard with your service advisors, your technicians, the investments that you've made into your dealerships, into training and all of those things. But most importantly, it's also going to give you predictable performance. So James, you know, when we look at it, there's kind of a five-step framework we like to go through to really kind of help make sure that we're hitting those and uncovering those opportunities.
Yeah, the five-step framework is a great rule of thumb to where if this is the first time you're hearing about profits leakage, or if it's just something you haven't done in a while, right? And we kind of want to take you on a guide and give you some easy steps to take away. So the first thing is one, we got to see the leakage. We have to identify the inconsistencies, right? We have to look at the reports. We have to manage our pricing. Two, we have to understand drivers. Okay. Is it an advisor adjustment? Is it a technician adjustment? Is it an op code adjustment, right? Are we using op codes that have old pricing because we didn't update them? Do our advisors, are they not understanding or confident in our pricing? What's driving this leakage? Three, we have to align our pricing strategy. If our customer facing employees are adjusting pricing, we probably need to validate that it's still the accurate pricing, right? Once again, we're not doing this by gut. We're not doing this by, assumptions. We want to use market data, and we really want to align and make sure the pricing strategy that we have is really what's still considered and still fits the market. One, we got to enforce consistency. Okay. Once again, we said if you don't have a pricing policy, you have a pricing policy. We have to reduce the variability of our pricing, right? We go through a lot of work setting our prices. You guys do a lot of discovery. You go through a lot of market data to define what your perfect price is. We have to ensure that our team is collecting that. And then five, measure and improve. Okay, we can't fix it and then forget it. We have to have continuous measurement. We have to have continuous visibility, and we have to be ready to adjust this as markets shift. So where do we start? Well, a number of areas, right? Pricing compliance, work mix, opcode accuracy, discount behavior. Okay, which one do I go to first, right? Well, we like to recommend that you actually start with what we call pencil and eraser changes, right? So really what you need to do before you know where to start is you need to understand the opportunities, okay? As we talked about with step one, right? Having the consistency, having the visibility and understanding the driver, okay? Are there underpriced services? Are there miscoded labor ops? Okay. Are we missing warranty claims because of pricing? Is it inconsistent advisor behavior? Understanding these opportunities will also let you know where do I start. Okay. Do I start in reevaluating my market based on my pricing? Do I start with reevaluating my labor ops to make sure they're all updated correctly? Do I start with ensuring that my effective labor rate is managed properly so I can maximize my warranty? Or is it really all of that stuff's dialed in, but I need to review my policy with my advisors and ensure that there's not only an understanding, but a commitment of behavior from them. So the key takeaway when you really lean into perfect pricing and you really look at that getting away from a forced dilemma, the key takeaway is you don't need to drive more customers necessarily. What you need is better execution. What you need is better pricing execution. You need to make sure that customers come over the drive when they receive the work that they've approved, that it's done at the proper price all the time. Now, granted, everybody wants more customers. More customers you see at perfect pricing, the more profitability. But what we've noticed is the key takeaway when there's a profitability question is it's not that you need more customers across the drive. It's really that you need better execution on the pricing that you have. So as we mentioned the data fog earlier, let's talk about why this is hard to do alone, right? Millions of data points as we think about, how many RO lines do you have that run through your service department every year, right? Millions. So it's almost impossible to manage those on an individual basis. You have inconsistent systems, right? So is the pricing in your scheduler the same pricing that's in your DMS, that's in the same pricing as your multi-point inspection? Like we have to make sure that when we establish a price, that it's established across all our systems and then no visibility across stores, especially if we have any platform leaders or leaders over multiple dealerships here, how do you manage each store, not just as an individual, but as a whole? And how can you confirm that the pricing across each store is validated in the same way. So very hard to do alone just based on the volume of business that happens and the amount that has to be managed. So Maureen, let's talk about the role that market intelligence, I've mentioned it a couple times, you've mentioned it a couple times.
Mhm.
What is market intelligence really?
James, one of the things that I think really has the biggest impact is you need to know both what are like franchise in similar markets, whether it be rural, metro, what is there, how are we compared to them in the market? We also need to look at the aftermarket. As we talked about, when a customer leaves, often they're going to the aftermarket. But the role of market intelligence is really around the fact that what dealers need is intuitive, normalized service data in order to make those really data-driven decisions. Having that competitive pricing insights, both from a like franchise as well as aftermarket. And as you said, James, we have the privilege of many of them having groups, right? And so even if you have 10, 20, or plus dealerships, each one of those dealerships is going to have a different aftermarket and a different franchise market around it. And really having that visibility into pricing compliance. How do we really identify with our service advisors, is it a knowing issue or is it a doing issue? Because those are two very different coaching scenarios that the experts of the service leadership would be coaching on. When this visibility exists, what it allows the leaders to do is to really identify the profit leakage, really kind of hone into, one of the things we always say is that a very small incremental change can have a very exponential result. They can know how competitively priced they are. And that not only is for their decisions on pricing, but about building that confidence with the service advisors. And then protect retention while improving margin. We talked a lot about the margin erosion crisis. It's not cyclical. It's always something. Got a chance to look over yesterday, the last kind of 20 years and all of the different things that have impacted us. And it always comes back to the fixed operations being the profit engine that gets us through any kind of those crises. And what this does is it really, when you use market intelligence, it transforms the pricing from guesswork to precision decision making. And that's really when we get to that point that we're talking about a new standard of fixed operations, which we call the performance advantage. It's really where the dealerships can achieve. They elevates the growth revenue in the dealership. It becomes, instead of a margin erosion, it becomes a margin multiplier. We see it day in and day out. It's a retention uplift and high performing fixed ops team, because you're giving them the tools to be able to make these decisions, to coach the people, and to be able to drive that lifetime customer value. Fixed operations, it really becomes the strategic growth engine for the entire dealership. When I have the privilege of working with dealers and GMs and corporate executives, everyone knows they need to lean into it. In my 40 years of automotive, 98% of dealers and GMs just never had an opportunity to sit in a fixed operations role. So how do we really help the entire leadership team of the dealership to understand that profit engine? We often get asked, what happens if nothing changes? What do our dealers face? Well, they're going to face continued margin erosion. They're going to have loss of service visits. And one of the things, James, I always think about is how dealers are really digging into like the 5+ year vehicles at mileage bands, and how are we really doing a great job with them and ensuring that we're doing all of the things that make us successful, from a walk around to everything else. The other thing is that it just really gives us that opportunity. EV is another area that has allowed us the opportunity because of the quality of the technicians and the tools and the things that are required. The customer defection to aftermarket, if nothing changes, then they're going to begin to detract. We see it across the industry. How do we really get them coming back in? The inconsistent service advisor pricing behavior. When we look at that, that's one of the greatest impacts on effective labor rate is not having that consistency, not leaving something on the table or overcharging. The hidden profit leakage across thousands of reporters. You can really think about what just a couple of dollars would mean to you when you are taking that across all of the repair orders that you do in your dealership. But what happens if nothing changes? We have to really look at how we prevent fixed ops from allowing market disruptions, greater power over our dealership profitability. And the ways we've talked about, the framework, the ability to really hone in and use that data to make decisions is really what is going to make the change for us. And it kind of, James, I know we've talked about a lot of things, and I love to get to the Q&A portion and see what is on everybody's mind. Would you take us through kind of the final takeaways from what we've talked about in today's session?
Yeah, I think one, leakage is everywhere. I think everybody on the call hopefully was, at least walked away with one nugget of, oh man, I really need to go look at X, right? Because we know it's everywhere. We've seen it. The good news is small decisions drive big outcomes. This isn't a, monster mountain that you have to try to fix in 30 days. It's really based around small decisions that you can make today, tomorrow, a week from now, a month from now, and all of these will stack and drive big outcomes. Consistency beats strategy alone, right? We're all on call because we're strategic thinkers, we're strategic leaders, but what we found is consistency beats strategy all the time. You have to implement the strategy, but then manage it, measure it, and hold people accountable to it. And the last thing is fixed ops is the growth engine. We have to start to transition our mindset of fixed ops covering just expenses, right? Think about fixed absorption, right? The goal is 100% or 105%. Well, we want to challenge that, and we want it to be a profitability engine. However, if we don't accomplish the first three, the fourth one is never going to be possible. And so start small, find your leakage, okay? Make the small decisions necessary to drive the big outcomes. Stay consistent, right? Don't implement the change and then walk away, right? Let's stay consistent. Let's continue to measure. And when you start to hit those three, you're going to grow from fixed ops being a covering expense to actually being a growth engine. And it really is about just everyday consistency on the small things. You don't have to focus on 20 things. As you mentioned, we only really talked about 3 to 4 items today. But if you start there, it's going to really give you great momentum moving forward.
Thank you, James, so much. Melissa, do we have some questions that you've received from anybody in the audience?
As of right now, I don't have anything. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat right now, and we'll be happy to answer.
Okay. While we're looking for some of those questions, and James, obviously, if you see any as well that we can share, or maybe some of the questions we get asked the most, I want to kind of ask each of the attendees to kind of do a self-assessment. If you think about the things we've done and maybe write these 2 questions down. And the first is going to be, where am I losing money today? Would that be in pricing gaps, in discounting, in labor inconsistencies, or in warranty gaps? I think it's really important that we kind of take a moment. It's so hard because you have so many demands every day on what you're doing, both in service and parts. Where am I losing money today? Where do I have the greatest opportunity to maybe make it that a focus point? The second is, do I have visibility at an advisor level? Do I have visibility at an opcode level? And do you have visibility at an RO level? If you kind of look at those 2 questions and sort of areas that you can focus on, I think it would really help in really seeing what might be my next steps. Because the important thing is we want to make sure that you have one more thing that you can go out and really take a look at. Because as we said, a small incremental change can have a very exponential result.
Maureen,
James,
I
mhm.
think another question we get asked quite a bit is, where do I start? Like we went
Mhm.
over a couple key points, and we understand that sometimes starting to look at things, there's rabbit holes, right? And you branch into this and you go left and right. And next thing you know, you're 18 layers deep and you forget what you're even looking for. And so I think the best practice is to kind of keep it simple at the beginning. Understand your discounting and why it's happening. Start there. Talk with your advisors, right? If it's coupons you've sent out, that's fine. That's part of the business. But outside of that, why are we discounting? Okay. Is it around maybe two or three main services? Okay. If that's the case, when was the last time we actually priced and looked at the market for those? Right. If it's around big repairs, okay. Are we discounting because of our advisors' inability to really talk about the technical aptitude that's required for these repairs? Or once again, is it a price in the market? So start first with your discounting and your adjustments and talking with your team and understanding why are these going on. The second step would be now that you understand that, it's one of two things. It's either you need to reevaluate your pricing, or it's you need to reevaluate your process for adjustments and discounts. And it's okay to admit, like, man, maybe the process isn't as tight as it should be. Maybe we didn't communicate it effectively to the team. That's fine. Like that's just part of leadership. But understanding what the next review step is and leaning into that. I think the biggest thing we see during these conversations is they're not willing to make the necessary change, but yet they expect a different result. And we all know like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, but expecting a different result. So if we don't change the way we are looking at these items, we're not going to be able to drive the profitability I think that each person wants within their dealership.
Thank you for that, James. One of the things that we also get asked quite a bit is, there's a connection directly between customer pay and warranty. James, how does weak customer pay pricing or inconsistent discounting ultimately impact warranty reimbursement opportunities for the dealership?
Yeah. And, we talked about that earlier that, inconsistent effective labor rate, inconsistent pricing, hidden discounts, those things like that, they really are killers to getting your maximized warranty rate. And the most frustrating thing we hear from clients is that, you know, our price is set, we're established, we should be expecting a rate of X. And then when the data comes out and you start evaluating the repair orders, all of a sudden there's a ton of discounts. And I'll say a ton, there's an unexpected amount of discounts. There's labors being adjusted. There's a lot of hidden things that really then result in a rate of Y. And sometimes that could be pretty substantial, a $20 difference in some cases. And so it's important that when you're establishing your pricing based on the market and you're then going to expect to be able to move your warranty rate, if you don't have a solid compliance process, it's going to happen and you're going to be leaving money on the table.
Thank you for that. Melissa, do we have anything else that is in the chat?
I don't see any other questions. I want to thank you both for your time today and for everybody being on the call. Do you have your contact information that you guys can put back up on the screen?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, if James, you just go to the next one, the easiest is if you guys just scan the QR code here, then it will come to us and Kentucky as well, but it will come to us. And if you have any additional questions or you want to learn any additional information, we are more than happy, but you can just take a picture of this. We found Melissa really works well for them. And obviously we work very closely with Melissa and Sarah and Jason and everyone at Kentucky ADA, and you can always reach us through them as well. And we want to thank you so much for this opportunity today. And I want to thank you personally, as much as you can prepare. Clearly, to have a hotel lose its internet, they have way too many people here. I called down and they said, "We're so sorry, we just lost our internet." I go, "Okay, well." So I like everything we deal with every day, right? We just adjust and adapt. We remain flexible yet focused, and I think that's a great way to end this session today. Is if we focus in on just a few things that we know are going to really drive additional revenue for the dealership by utilizing some of these strategies, we're happy to help you on any additional questions that you have at any time. But
All right.
thank you so much for the invitation.
Thanks, guys. Everybody have a good day.